Hello and welcome to Normal Ireland Live. I am Ben Mclaine. Apologies, I know we're a bit late. We had some technical issues behind the scenes, and as usual, even though he wasn't involved in the show, it's Lewis's fault. Okay, just putting that out there. It's Lewis's fault. If you're reading this in the comments, Lewis's fault. Tonight I am joined by, and rather underprepared for, the wonderful Harriet Williamson from Navarra Media. How are you doing, Harriet?
Hi Ben, it's lovely to be here again. I'm so glad to be invited back. I thought, after the first one, I'd never be asked again. But
Yeah.
I'm feeling festive and I'm here and we're going to do our best with some economic stories, which I'm
Yeah,
excited
we're gonna do our best with those. We totally know what we're talking about with those ones. I'm loving the tinsel, by the way. Also, yes, of course you were invited back, even though you showed us up the first time that you came on, which is, I'm sure, what you meant, of course. But let's get on with the show. Right. So, coming up on tonight's show, Jamie Driscoll joins the Green Party. James Meadway goes after Rory Stewart. And activists plead with prison to get medical care for hunger strikers. Now, remember, you can help us grow by visiting turnleftmedia.co.uk/support to help fund our work, or by becoming a YouTube member. And so let's, I think, get on with the first story. So, the Green Party has announced a big addition to their membership. Jamie Driscoll has joined the party after previously being involved in your party. The former Labour Metro Mayor was expelled from the party for sharing a platform with film director Ken Loach. Of course, Ken Loach is absolutely brilliant. Ken Loach wrote I, Daniel Blake. Absolutely fantastic film. Ken Loach was expelled from the party after showing support for Labour Against the Witch Hunt, a group in which seeks to end the weaponisation of anti-Semitism. I think the case for that has only gotten stronger over time. The case that Labour Against the Witch Hunt were making has only gotten stronger over time with everything that's going on right now between Israel and Palestine, and indeed Palestine Action, which we'll talk about later. But Jamie was expelled for sharing a panel with the veteran director. He then ran as an independent for the North East mayoralty race against the Labour machine, and he managed to win 126,000 votes to Labour's Kin McGuinness, who won 185,000. From 2024, Driscoll has been running a local independent campaign group called Majority. He was then involved with your party, along with Beth Winter and Andrew Feinstein. The three were directors, if you remember, of MOU Limited, the company in charge of your party donations. After the public fights, Driscoll decided to step away. This comes after 5 Labour councillors in Brent defected to the Greens. Now, earlier today, my colleague Curtis caught up with Jamie Driscoll. So let's have a look at that.
I'll start off with the obvious. Why have you joined the Green Party?
Well, I think all of your viewers will be of the opinion that Britain's a serious mess. It's run in the interests of billionaires, and somebody needs to fix that. And I've been in politics a long time, and I'd rather not be in politics. I'd rather do other things in my life. But I've got kids, and I look at the way the future's unfolding, and I think I'm not prepared to leave this. The Green Party have been on a surge. I think there's more. Everyone I talk to in the Green Party is a socialist. I think there's more socialists in the Green Party than the Labour Party, certainly. And I think you've just got to step up and do something. They've convinced me they're serious. Zach has certainly played a blinder in terms of the media, but there's an awful lot of people in there who recognise that it's one thing for people who are already convinced of the need for progressive politics. It's quite another to get into power and do something about it. And the left's always made this mistake, not always, but many, of being too coy, or the soft left of not actually saying, yeah, we do need a wealth tax. No, that is a genocide. No, poverty is a political choice and we can change it. And at every point, he said, no, let's stand and fight on this point. And that's what I see with the local Greens here. So it's about getting stuff done.
Yeah, in one of your quotes, you said this is a serious party now. And I think for a long time, the Greens were seen as on the fringe, not a political party that's going to be anywhere near power. And now, look, you're seeing 17, 18% in the polls. Recent YouGov poll has the Greens tied with the Conservatives, 1% behind Labour. So actually, this seems like a serious, viable vehicle for the left, not just a pressure group.
Well, it's funny, isn't it? Let's suppose you and I, Curtis, had spoke on the 5th of July last year when Keir Starmer was outside there saying, Downing Street saying, oh, we've got a 174-seat majority. Then, and if you'd said to me, yeah, but in 16, 17 months' time, they'll be fourth in the polls, Reform will be 15 points clear. People would have thought, what's he on? But that's happened so quickly. And politics is febrile in this country. It's a mess because it's not delivering for the people of this country. And they keep rehashing the same, whipping a dead horse to try and claim that trickle down is going to solve anything. And it's just pissing everybody off. And so it is going to shift. And if the Green Party is the vehicle to do it, that is fantastic news.
So, of course, the decision is going to be down to members, but would you personally put yourself forward in the selection process to be an MP? And if so, where would it be?
Yeah. Do I want to be Grand Leader who takes over the universe? That is not my motivation. But yes, I think if we look ahead, it's you were talking earlier about sort of perhaps the ambition of the Green Party, and they were delighted when they had an MP, and then over the moon when they got 4. And I think the thinking has not got to be, will that go to 9 at the next election, 16 at the next election after that? No, I think it should be going for 100 MPs at the next election. Who knows what's going to happen in 2029? But hung parliament seems extremely likely. And that means another election very soon after. So I think if I'm able to be useful there, because I've ran an arm of government and everybody's, even my opponents said actually he was quite good at it, then I think, I would be up for that if they want me to do it.
Just after the election, it was a good showing for the Greens. I mean, they quadrupled their seats. And I think for most people on the left, it was going to be, the Greens are going to be the thorn in the side of a Labour government. I think we've changed our expectations. I think you're absolutely right. 20 seats is not enough for the Greens. It needs to be more. But of course, that would mean some sort of pact, maybe coalition with the Labour Party. Now, Zach Plansky, the leader, has said, I'm not going to work with Labour under Keir Starmer. A spokesperson said potentially if there's a different leader. Do you think the Greens need to work with Labour in some kind of capacity? And would there need to be certain red lines they would have to meet in order to do so? Because, of course, at the end of the day, the Greens have surged, but so has Reform.
Yeah. I don't think Zach Polanski is going to get an opportunity to work with Keir Starmer because Keir will be long gone by then. The vultures are circling. And I don't think any of the vultures will last any longer than he has because they have no answers. The chances of Andy Burnham getting there are very slim. I know Andy well. We worked well together closely, and actually he's a very decent guy. But even if he were their leader, the Labour Party is still a nest of vipers, and it's still going to be pursuing neoliberal policies, and it won't deliver anything. So, I mean, we might end up to, 30, 40 Labour MPs after the next election. I've really no idea. So you've got to sort of cross that bridge when you come to it. Now, working with people, you always work with people. That's what I did when I was North of Tyne mayor for 5 years, negotiated the best funded devolution deal in this country by working with people like Grant Shapps and Michael Gove, who are not of my politics, but when it comes to getting stuff done, you've got to get stuff done. So would it be a confidence and supply arrangement? I don't know. But I guarantee that what would be on the table would be voting reform, because our electoral system is, it's just bonkers, isn't it?
So how was your relationship with those involved in your party? I mean, despite leaving, and let's be honest, it's kind of been full of drama. Do you see a working relationship with them? And do you think that your party is a viable vehicle of the left?
I think my relationship with the people in your party is probably better than the relationships between each other in your party, quite possibly. I've had some really nice messages today from a lot of the people I worked with. There are some good people in there, and I really do wish them luck. I was asked a question by a journalist earlier. He says, you've gone from the Labour Party to independent. You were involved in your party, now the Greens. He says, no, I haven't changed. The manifesto I was elected on in 2019 as a Labour mayor, which I mostly delivered, the Greens were very, very happy with it. The election manifesto I had in 2024, your party members loved it. Green Party members loved it. Most of the Labour Party members loved it, although they keep getting kicked out now. So the politics doesn't change. And I've never been one who's seen tribalism. I remember in the Labour Party sitting in a meeting and someone saying, I love the Labour Party, me. And I'm thinking, that's a weirdly dysfunctional set of human relationships you have then, because I love my wife and my children.
True. So that is, I mean, it's I suppose it's when it comes to it, but you do imagine potentially the Greens working with Jeremy Corbyn, Zara Sultan. I know they're not elected leader. There's a collective leadership, but there is, a strong. I mean, when it comes to grassroots, there is a strong want for different parties to work together. You mentioned how we're living under first past the post. We don't have PR, so inevitably there's going to have to be some sort of hacks and stuff. Could you envision certain candidates from the Green Party standing down in constituencies and maybe your party have a better shot of winning a particular seat?
My sense is that this works better when you let the people on the ground make the decisions. So with majority that you mentioned earlier, when the South Jesmond in Newcastle by-election came up, we had a discussion amongst ourselves. There was a vote on it. Should we stand somebody as an independent? Does someone want to run under a majority banner? Should we back the Greens? The decision was, well, let's invite the Green candidate to talk to us. Everybody interviewed her. She did a cracking job answering the questions. She was on there for about 45 minutes. And then it was unanimous. Yeah, let's just roll in behind the Greens. And that campaign won by a margin of 55 votes. Now, they led it, and it was a very energetic campaign they did. But I think that's a far better result than people saying, no, we must build for the long term and standing and getting nowhere and demoralizing their own members. So where the politics aligns, I think people should work together. But I think that largely comes around by building trust. And there's no substitute to actually working together on joint campaigns. And so much of politics is actually about campaigns that aren't electoral. We've got an Israeli arms factory in Newcastle, Raphael, state-owned. That's, I can't conceive of any world in which the Labour Party should be supporting manufacturing arms for a regime on trial for genocide. And that's uniting huge amounts of the grassroots progressives, not just the left. And you've got the Labour Party going, oh, no, we can't really say anything because it's Israel. So that sort of thing brings people together.
That was former Metro Mayor Jamie Driscoll. I 100% agree with him. Labour, the Greens, rather, should be going for 100 seats. People should be abandoning Labour in their droves. I tweeted something earlier from the Turn Left account about the hunger strikers, which we will be talking about later on. And somebody who was called like Labour to Win tweeted at me saying that they should all be deported. And I'm like, mate, this is the kind of views like the BNP had back in 2005. Like, what happened to the Labour Party? The Labour Party is like full of like legit like right-wing freaks now. I can't. It blows my mind. Like taking the literal position of reform with the popularity of fucking UKIP right now. Unbelievable. Yes, but that was that was Jamie Driscoll, who always puts it far more eloquently than I could. But what I'm interested in is how significant is this going to be for the political landscape? Because on the one hand, there's the Your Party stuff, so maybe we should start with that. Harriet, how significant do you think this will be for the relationship between Your Party and the Greens? The fact that Jamie Driscoll has, of course, defected.
Ben, I think that this is a big get for the Greens, and I think that we need to recognise that. Jamie Driscoll is a serious political player. He was a popular and pragmatic mayor. He led the North East devolution deal, as he mentioned in his interview with you guys earlier. He signed the agreement with Gove, something that speaks to pragmatism. He took power back for the people of the North East, who had kind of been forgotten when there is so much focus on London-centric and Westminster politics. And then after being a great mayor for East of Tyne, he was scorned by Labour, blocked from being standing as their candidate for mayor of the North East for factional and frankly ridiculous reasons, and then came quite close to just winning it as an independent. I think he did incredibly well there. The other reason that I think that Jamie Driscoll is a serious person in politics and somebody that I'm really glad that the Greens have got now is because he's actually a normal person, and he's done a host of different jobs in both the private and the public sector before going into politics. in his 40s, and he has real life experience in jobs outside of this sort of elite sphere that most people who are MPs, if they're not career politicians, tend to have worked in. And I think that hopefully this means that more seasoned left-wing political players will see the Greens as the electoral vehicle of choice to challenge this increasingly authoritarian and morally bankrupt Labour government, and of course the rising threat of reform, who are polling well into the 30s in a number of polls.
There's been in this country for a while a sort of like cohort of thinkers who think very local. And I'm thinking of people who particularly push the Preston model, right, of local democracy. The Preston model, basic idea for those who don't know, is you keep money local by investing in anchor institutions locally. So you keep money circulating locally by doing things like, the investments in anchor institutions, but also using like credit unions, cooperatives, and investing pension funds in local infrastructure projects is another way that they've done it. And for a while, it didn't really have a home. And I'm wondering now that both Grace Blakely, who is an economist who's pushed for this, and Jamie Driscoll have joined this push. Do you think that, I mean, first of all, do you think that democratic localism might be the future and the big sort of like economic push in the next few years? Because I could see it being the case, particularly with figures like Mamdani, so focused on New York, Jamie Driscoll so focused on his mayoralty, or the running for his mayoralty, I suppose. And I'm curious whether that is the future of progressivism, but more so if that might be where the Greens are going now that they've sort of like taken a step with Zach Polanski. Do you think maybe they're going to take a step towards the democratic localism?
Well, if you look at Mamdani's success, we can see that having people who are so focused on and in tune with the identity of their local areas and communities creates not just a sense of place, but a sense of real rootedness, and brings people along, people of like lots of different identities, lots of different ethnic and class backgrounds, of all genders and religions. They feel like they belong in this specific place, and that the person who is going to represent them is actually there to be invested in their interests. And I think the reason why this is so important is because outside of London and the South, the rest of the country so often gets forgotten. Now, I feel kind of a little bit jealous of people of the Northeast, people in Newcastle, etc., because they got to have such a committed mayor in Jamie Driscoll. I'm from Lincoln in Lincolnshire, and what we've got is Andrea Jenkins for reform. It's not a great comparison.
Oh, that's rough. That's rough. I didn't actually know that. I didn't actually know that you were under the watchful eye of Andrea Jenkins and her opera. That's unfortunate.
I was going to mention Insomnia, but I just didn't have the heart.
Jesus Christ, it's awful. It's awful. But we don't like Andrea Jenkins, but some Andreas are bad, some Andreas are good. But Labour today suffered a blow due to another Andrea Egan, who won the election to become Unison's General Secretary. Now, that doesn't seem related necessarily to Jamie Driscoll, but here's the connection in my mind. Andrea Egan is, of course, a socialist who was expelled from Starmer's Labour Party. Jamie Driscoll as well. And as Aaron Bastani said earlier today, Starmer just seems to have made too many enemies. Do you think Driscoll parking his cannons behind Zach Polanski is a blow to an already battered Keir Starmer, who's probably thinking, oh God, the largest union in the country is now under the control of somebody that I expelled from the Labour Party. We're in a funding crisis. Am I right in thinking that they've stopped publishing their funding data, the Labour Party? I think they have, haven't they?
They've certainly stopped publishing their membership data.
Yes, yeah, that too. But yes, do you think that what do you think Keir Starmer might be thinking, if he's thinking anything about Jamie Driscoll's move into the Greens?
Well, if he's thinking anything at all, it almost doesn't really matter. Like whether he thinks it's important or not, it is. He has made a lot of enemies, but this is is what happens when a right-wing Labour leadership and internal parliamentary Labour Party treats the left with such contempt. So a Labour spokesperson today called Jamie Driscoll a political liability, and that's because he's been involved in a number of other projects since quitting Labour, right? And my response to that is so fucking what? So what? We're in a radical new space for politics. The two-party system is cooked. Why wouldn't you try and get involved in other things? In terms of like you're going from having a founding role in, even if not one of the two main co-leaders, in terms of your party and the Greens, it has been really disheartening to see how infighting and chaos around the founding process has lost not just Driscoll, but Andrew Feinstein and Beth Winter. Your party shouldn't have let that happen, but they have done. And the fact that Jamie Driscoll has now gone to the Greens, it shows that people are being pragmatic in this space. They are picking the most reliable electoral vehicle for making change within this country. And at the moment, due to Polanski, due to Rachel and Martin, that is looking very much like the Greens. So yeah, whatever Starmer thinks about it kind of won't matter. I don't really like to make political predictions too strongly, but I feel like Labour are going to be wiped out in the May locals, and then Starmer will have to step down. He's cooked, whatever.
So, was that a Labour MP? You said you said that Driscoll was a political liability. Was that a Labour MP?
A Labour Party spokesperson. That's been their comment. Yeah.
Sorry, I just think my instant reaction to that was the entire leadership of your party is a political liability. What are you talking about? Sorry, just
I find it quite interesting that this is the only language they had to use to discredit him. They didn't say thank you so much for all your time being a great mayor of the Northeast, of the region that he was a mayor for and was popular and successful in doing that. They didn't say we actually lost somebody really competent when we blocked him from running as a mayor for the wider devolved region. No, they insulted him, said he's a political liability, and said it's because he tried to get involved in other things that weren't Labour. It's like, well, you didn't want him in Labour. You pushed somebody out who was actually really good, and then you go bad-mouthing them later on when they decide to join a new party. Like, these people are not pleasant, and it's a poor and short-sighted way to do politics, I think.
Yes, absolutely. I think we should probably go on to the next story. Sorry to cut you off, Harriet. I think I was supposed to be being told in my ear that we should go on, but the sound wasn't coming through. That was very odd. Sorry about that. Sorry about that, Harriet, and sorry about that, Curtis. Having all sorts of tech problems today. So let's go on to our second story, and this one is, unfortunately, I'm sorry to inflict this upon you again, about Rory Stewart. So, a few weeks ago, Zach Polanski went on Rory Stewart's show, The Rest is Politics, and it's fair to say that Rory was uncharitable to Zach.
How much are we paying every debt interest?
So here's the question: borrowing.
How much are we spending every year on debt interest?
Well, we don't need to, do we?
How much are we spending?
Borrowing from yourself. So who are you borrowing from?
I'm just trying to work out how good you are on the numbers. How much are we spending every year on debt interest?
So actually, of all people, Richard Tice has been saying the same thing. During COVID, we gave loans to the Bank of England.
You can't give me a rough figure on how much we're spending on debt interest every year?
Well, there's £70 billion that we owe to the Bank of England, but we don't actually owe that money.
You mean the debt or the deficit?
The debt.
Okay, the debt is
the deficit, sorry.
Okay, we are spending £100 billion annually on debt interest, right?
Is it 11% of everything?
Debt interest, huge amount of money.
Right.
So one of the things I suppose I'm getting at
but what I'm going straight back at you is we don't need to spend that money. So that money has been created as an idea. We're spending that money straight back to ourselves.
This is my point about the change, is that we do need to spend that money now, because that is how we borrow the money from the markets to fund the things that we're funding.
Now, we don't have to spend through markets. That's a choice that our governments have made over the past 15 years. There's other ways to approach it. But on the wider point, Zach quite obviously slips up and then corrects himself on the difference between deficit and debt. But then, later on in the show, Rory acts like Zach just didn't know the difference.
He doesn't know the difference in deficit. Right, just to explain for most listeners, right, just in case other people are not. And so, am I being rude to listeners in having to explain this? I presume most of our listeners know, right? The debt is the total amount you've borrowed. The deficit is the amount you're adding to it every year. Thinking that our debt is 70 billion rather than our deficit is underestimating the scale of our debt about 15-fold.
It's not your listeners you're being rude to, Rory. It's Zach you were rude to. After that uncharitable showing, many people pointed out that Rory Stewart was just very dismissive without much good reason. Stewart got himself in trouble, of course, with Gary Stevenson as well, who he assumed didn't have proper economic qualifications. I'd say there's probably a level of classism there. And another thing was the gotcha questioning. Now, I've been on GB News a fair bit now, and in my research about media training, this is something that it always comes up. Gotcha questions are basically a way to trick someone into looking ignorant by using niche information, withholding information from them, and then making them feel stupid for not being able to answer every question. And there's a reason that generally we don't do this, right? Now, I'm not criticising Zach at all, but it's perfectly legitimate to say that you're not going to play pub quiz with your interviewer. That's not why you're there. It doesn't show good knowledge to just regurgitate information, regurgitate numbers. You don't want somebody just regurgitating numbers at you. That's not helpful. The same kind of problem exists in exam culture, where people can memorize things, and your ability to be able to memorize things is mistaken for good analysis. They're not the same thing. Sometimes what I'll say when I'm faced with this sort of interviewer is, I've got a feeling that you're going to tell me, and I don't want to risk getting it wrong. Just be honest with them, because eventually they'll ask you too many questions and you will trip up. It's inevitable. But another approach you could do is having your own gotcha questions. For example, Zach could have clapped back by asking how much billionaire wealth has increased by over that same period in the past 10 years, 15 years. There's different approaches, I think, to refocus the conversation. But the main point is that Rory's approach is uncharitable. I could sit here and ask Harriet questions about the economy that I've prepared, and eventually she would get one wrong, no matter how well she'd prepared, because we all would. I would as well. But the interviewer is cheating because they know the answers to the questions beforehand. Rory Stewart could well have sat there and only ever memorised those two pieces of information in his life about the economic situation, and asked Zach those questions, and still made Zach look silly for not knowing the answers. It's just a bad way of going about questioning an interviewee, because it targets the memorisation of facts and figures rather than the analysis, and the analysis is always kind of the more interesting thing. But I don't think, from the way that Rory approached the interview, I don't think Rory was interested in having a genuine conversation about alternative ways of viewing the economy. Economist James Meadway, however, has appeared on Zach Polanski's podcast Bold Politics this week, and a clip has been released where he claps back at Rory Stewart for the way he approached this interview.
I went on Vares's Politics and we had an economic conversation. I think the bit that hasn't been told is Vares's Politics said to me very specifically, we're going to record pre-budget, we're going to put out after budget, so we're not going to talk about the budget, and this is going to be an evergreen interview. I knew I was going into a conversation about being gay, about being bullied at school, about anti-Semitism, about that kind of more emotional storytelling thing, so that was very much what I was prepped for. And then when the interview ended, I said to Rory, if you told me we were going to talk about economics, I could have learnt those numbers and it would have been a less interesting interview. I'm an actor and I would have just been firing off numbers at you. I don't think that was the best way to do an interview. And then obviously when it finished and I'd left the room, he bastardized that story to say, oh, I said it was unfair because I was an actor, and that's not quite how it went. Now, having said all of that, I do hold my hands up that as a politician, you kind of got to be ready for any question. And so I will absolutely go away and memorise numbers like £3 trillion of the national debt, and 95% is the debt to GDP ratio. But I have a wider question, like how helpful is it to treat politicians like spreadsheets where we just remember numbers and churn them out, and then that's for political conversation?
It's not remotely helpful. I mean, I have to say, I think this whole business of you drag someone in and they chant out numbers at you, numbers that don't really mean anything. By the time you're talking about billions of pounds, this is not a number that means very much. It's way beyond anything any of us can really conceptualise on a day-to-day basis. They just sound big. The debt, you just did it, £3 trillion. Rory, I noticed, got that wrong, by the way.
He then thought that the debt was £70 billion, right? Which the debt is actually closer to £1 trillion.
You say it was 1 trillion. Because this is the danger with this, by the way. You can always slip up. It doesn't matter. You can sit there looking all clever and maybe you've got a prepared sheet of numbers to interrogate on. But what are you actually getting out of that? What is anyone getting out of that?
Well, it's interesting because, again, Rory, I think on a podcast from last week said, ultimately, the conversation I was having with Zach Polanski is, do we want a bigger state or not? Yeah. And he was arguing against a bigger state. And I thought, well, we're really getting to the root of this now. Really what you're committing to there is austerity, whatever name that you call it. And it feels like that's at the heart of this argument.
These numbers get used to bash out and clear out of the way any other conversation we could have about the economy, right? So why is the debt like this? Why is the deficit like this? That's the sort of question that's a bit more interesting, right? Why is it that the economy isn't working well? And it isn't really for most people. Loads of people paying more and more for their energy bills, but fossil fuel companies making their all-time record profits off the back of it, right? That's a better story than just, here's a number, it's really big, we better do austerity, because that's what we had for like 15 years now in various different forms.
I occasionally run into right-wing libertarians. I'm going somewhere with this, I promise. I occasionally run into right-wing libertarians who, that's often called ANCAPs, people who don't believe that we should have any state whatsoever and capitalism should just be allowed to do its thing. The state should be as minimal as possible, just enforcing property rights. And part of the problem with ANCAPs is that, of course, they don't understand the role the state plays in securing currency, in making sure that there is a stable market for private businesses to operate on, and in securing disputes between, being a resolver of disputes between individuals. There's a reason you can't just what's the term? Send everything out to to like private security companies. You can't have arbitration done by everybody's hired security company, because my hired security company is not going to be as good as Jeff Bezos's hired security company. But what I'm getting at is that right-wing libertarians, of course, don't see the role the state plays. I think people like Rory Stewart are along that spectrum. They're just not as far along that spectrum. I think Rory Stewart views the state as a passive regulator of the market, designed to serve the market rather than an active participant in the economy. And I think the state is an active participant in the economy. Now, I'm a big fan of Mariana Mazzucato and her book, The Entrepreneurial State, where she argues that the state should be an active participant in the economy. Now, Mazzucato isn't a modern monetary theorist, but takes some of the principles of MMT as long as the investment is driven towards missions or large aspirational projects that will have long-term benefits. Indeed, the state can make long-term investments to drive growth that a private business actually can't. The primary purpose of a private business is to get a return on investment for shareholders. That's their only primary purpose in most cases. They need profit. They can't invest in projects that might take a decade to come to fruition. So their potential to stimulate growth is limited compared to the state. The state doesn't have such limitations beyond the need to manage inflation, gilt yields, interest rates, and a few other things that the state has to take account of in economic terms. The state is a more dynamic tool. It's not one that you simply sell off to pay back investors in the short term. If you have a small state, you have a disastrous society in a lot of ways. But in a lot of ways, I'm also interested in the nature of the state. Who does it serve? Who is the big government being made made to serve? And I think this story is part of the history too. Having these big stories told by the state in the way that we are spending is part of the history. It's always worth remembering that the very technology you're using to watch me on right now was built by state investment in the space race, as Mazzucato says. Nearly all the technological revolutions in the past, from the internet to today's green tech revolution, required a massive push by the state. Silicon Valley's techno-libertarians might be surprised to find out that Uncle Sam's funded many of the innovations behind the information technology revolution. The iPhone is often heralded as the quintessential example of what happens when a hands-off government allows genius entrepreneurs to flourish, and yet the development of the features that make the iPhone a smartphone rather than a stupid phone was publicly funded. The iPhone depends on the internet. The progenitor of the internet was ApparaNet, a program funded in the 1960s by the Defense Advanced Research Projects Agency, DARPA, which is part of the Defense Department in the US. The Global Positioning System, GPS, began as a 1970s US military program called Navistar. The iPhone's touchscreen technology was developed by the country Fingerworks, which was founded by a professor at the publicly funded University of Delaware and one of his doctoral candidates who received grants from the National Science Foundation and the CIA. Even Siri, the iPhone's cheery voice recognizing personal assistant, can trace its lineage to the US government. It's a spin-off of a DARPA artificial intelligence project. Even AI ultimately comes from investment in the state. The state is an amazing participant in the economy when we allow it to be, and austerity simply hasn't worked. Looking at the debt interest, debt and deficit, looking at those figures and going, well, we have to cut back our spending and live within our means. It's bullshit. It just is. Cutting spending at the zero lower bound, that's the lowest part of the economy, the people with the least, is daft. Because it halts the circulation of money as consumers begin to cut back. 15 years of doing this has not worked. Why, Rory, would we keep doing the same thing over and over again and expecting different results? Harriet, what did you make of how Zach was treated and James's response?
Ben, I just want to say one thing before we get started. I really worry for people who genuinely enjoy The Rest is Politics. I've literally got one of the architects of a disastrous illegal war and a former Tory MP who voted for austerity measures time and time again, laundering their reputation as cosy podcast dads and raking in the cash with this product. Why do people give it their time? Literally. I mean, Rory Stewart, you know, when you said Zach could have clapped back at him by saying, oh, how much has billionaire wealth gone up then? How about Zach said to Rory Stewart, why did you predict with all certainty that Kamala Harris would win the 2024 US election? Why have you been saying that Prince Andrew's alleged behaviour with Epstein victim Virginia Giuffre, now sadly deceased, needs to have like less focus and scrutiny on it because it happened before 9/11 and apparently there are more pressing issues now? Like, Zach was very controlled. He did not ask Rory Stewart about anything like that. He kept it totally warm. He was friendly. He asked the question. I'd have gone on the attack. Honestly, if they had treated me like that, I would have gone for the jugular. But just to go back to like that poor prediction that Rory Stewart made, which turned out to be disastrously incorrect, and the Prince Andrew thing, I think that Stewart has said on many occasions that he is an ardent monarchist, which is why he might feel the need to say that Prince Andrew's behaviour needs a bit less focus and scrutiny. What it comes back to is the fact that someone like Rory Stewart cannot read the room. He is totally out of touch, which is why he needs to rely on something like a gotcha line of questioning. He told Zach he was coming in to speak on some specific issues. And then if you watch that Rest of Politics episode, the bit they clip up for the intro, because it is the spiciest part in their view, is the gotcha bit on economics, where they're like, oh, Zach doesn't know what he's talking about. He got something wrong. He misspoke and he got the number wrong on what government debt is. They got what they wanted out of it. Journalistically, that's the most interesting part.
And that's the interesting thing. He didn't even get the number wrong, because what he said was he gave a specific figure about the Bank of England. Like, he didn't actually go for the, directly answer Rory Stewart's question. And, you can criticize him for that if you like, but it does sort of like get into the if you start answering, the problem is when you're in this situation, and I know because I've been in the situation, not with them obviously, with the GB News interviewers, if you start answering questions or start guessing the answers to questions, the danger is that they'll just keep asking you questions until you slip up, and you of course will slip up, but it's not even really a gotcha, because it's not a good gotcha, I should say. It's obviously meant as a gotcha. Yeah, because...
But they certainly thought it was, because they used it as the initial clip to lead into their episode. And then Stuart didn't know what he was talking about either, because he got the trillion figure wrong. It should have been 3 trillion, as James Meadway said.
Yeah. Yes. I also think it's really disingenuous to hear somebody talk about, to hear somebody say deficit, and then assume that means that they don't know the difference between the two. Like I just think it's so uncharitable to do that. But another question I was going to ask you, and I have got to keep an eye on the time. Do you think there's a path out of this economic orthodoxy that normalises austerity and allows people like Rory Stewart to just passively not think about what they're doing or saying and not critically examine the way that our state and our economy runs, and just sort of, they're allowed to just sort of like go on without thinking because they can dismiss any ideas outside of the neoliberal orthodoxy? Do you think there's a path out of that?
Well, there has to be, or else what's the point of anything that we're doing here? Literally, what is the point? Austerity was a political choice, and it has created much greater costs down the road in terms of people's health outcomes and their life chances. It has decimated communities up and down this country. It was not the only choice. It was one of many choices, and it was what the Tory Lib Dem coalition government decided to go with. But for people like Rory Stewart, who've shown a very vast and unpleasant level of snobbery when it comes to people like Gary Stevenson, and then again to Zach Polanski, Stewart's a One Nation Tory. And One Nation Tories tend to want to keep things how they are because it's working quite well for them. You notice this in the responses of literally everyone in legacy media and in the political sphere. Is someone like Sophie Ridge or Laura Koonsberg, or even someone who I have quite a lot of time for, Victoria Derbyshire, or Stewart, or Alistair Campbell, are they going to really give the space to alternative paths of thought or rigorously question the prevailing orthodoxy on this stuff? They've got an investment in changing it because they are not affected. They are fine as they are. It's working for them. They are in the 1 to 5% of uber privileged people whose lives are not being trashed by this economic order that's sucking every penny out of our pockets and making the life chances of ourselves and our kids so much worse. I absolutely back the idea of wealth taxes. I think we should equalise capital gains tax and income tax. A particularly egregious example from 2023 was that someone receiving 60k a year in the form of capital gains or dividends was paying less tax than someone in a job earning 35k a year. I mean, how is that fair? How is that allowed to happen? I think that, James Meadway's Bold Politics episode and his answers are really interesting and worth listening to. Like, he is actually an economist and far more clued up on this stuff than me. And his stuff on like how to handle the bond market so we don't end up in another Liz Truss situation. And I strongly feel that bond markets should not be dictating the democratic decision-making process. But Meadway talks about how to manage them so that investors in British assets don't just dump them. And I think that this is incredibly important because Liz Truss is now used as like this terrifying, monstrous scare figure by the Labour government, and they can like lock in with their ironclad fiscal rules and say that nothing must ever change because we don't want to have a Liz Truss event. I mean, applying it to anyone who wants to do something economically different means that it's a bit of a stick to beat the Tories with. Yes, great, but it also stops us doing anything that's different or radical. And I think Meadway lays out quite well the way that we can get around this and actually do it.
Yeah, I am a big fan of James Meadway, I've got to say. I'm a big fan of James Meadway. I'm not a fan of Rory Stewart's like ignorance to the fact that like 15 years of austerity doesn't end in economic prosperity. It ends in Nigel Farage. Like, that's where like austerity leads. It leads to Nigel Farage. It leads to Tommy Robinson. It leads to all of these like rising far right figures that we could really do without. Sorry, Harry, I do have to go on. But before we do go on, we just want to show you a quick video.
For the last 45 years, there has been a massive transfer of wealth from the working and middle classes to the top 1%. Billions of pounds have been taken from the workers and handed to the economic elites. In 2008, the world came to a standstill. The market had failed. Capitalism was in crisis. Yet 16 years on, nothing has changed. The bankers weren't jailed, the banks were bailed out, ordinary people lost everything. It's 2025 and we are now reckoning with a Labour Party that seeks to implement a Tory agenda. We face rising right-wing forces, more division, more misinformation. Yet no one in the mainstream media wants to talk about the real issue, the economic elites who have increased their wealth while the rest of us have become poorer. This isn't just a crisis of inequality, it's a crisis of democracy. The rich aren't just getting richer, they're owning everything. We are facing a global oligarchy and nothing is being done. Why? Because of our media. The same oligarchs who hoard wealth also control our press and now our social networks. This is why independent media isn't just important, it's necessary. It's why we're calling on your support. Turn Left is an organisation run by 5 volunteers working around our full-time jobs. Your contributions have already made a huge difference, whether by covering rallies, producing vox pops and interviews, or upgrading our equipment. That's all possible because of you. But we can do so much more. We can be far more ambitious. So head over to turnleftmedia.co.uk/support, become a monthly supporter, or give a one-off donation. If you want to fight back against the billionaire class, then help us build a media for people, a media for planet, a media for socialism. Smash the oligarchs. Join Turn Left.
Brilliant. All right, let's go on to our third and final story. So, your body can't survive long without food, and death by starvation is a painful death. Typically, your organs will fail, often your heart, as your body eats itself, muscle wasting away, the protein lost before the most vital organs begin to shut down. Quite often, people go into cardiac arrest and suffer very painfully before they eventually pass away. I'd ask you to really imagine that, and then ask yourself, is that a fate that someone deserves for throwing paint on some military planes? I am, of course, talking about Kessa Zura, who has been on hunger strike now for 46 days. She is one of the original Filton 24 protesters. Kessa was arrested when she was 19, she's now 20, and has spent 17 months awaiting trial. She's been refused bail and held for 17 months without trial. 17 months. To give you an idea, 17 months ago, that's 4 months before Donald Trump was re-elected and 13 days before the 2024 UK general elections, before this government took power. Just think back to 13 days of this Labour government. We were in a very different place politically. Think back to before Donald Trump. We were in a very different place politically. Of course, before Donald Trump's second election, I should say. 17 months, it's almost enough to have like 2 full-term pregnancies, and for them to take place one after the other. 17 months being kept in a prison where she's been mocked, sexualized, had her hijabs confiscated, her flower displays torn down, and is periodically being kept in solitary confinement according to her family. What have we done? By allowing the government to define terrorism as anyone they don't like. It's actually terrifying how disproportionate that power is. To be held for 17 months without trial is horrific. In the last few days, however, Kessa's situation, as she's gone on hunger strike, has gotten much worse. As the Middle East Eye reports, friends report that Kessa Zura, who has entered day 46 of her food refusal, is in imminent danger and no longer able to stand. But HMP Bronzefield has refused their repeated request to call an ambulance. Her friends have repeatedly called the South East Coast Ambulance Service, but were told that if one were sent, the prison would turn it away. Ella Mulsdale, Zara's next of kin, told Middle East Eye, that she has been on the phone to her since 5 p.m. yesterday, trying to help her breathe through the pain. She is in a life-threatening state at the moment, Mulsdale said. Zara's loved ones report that she is suffering from severe pain in her chest, lower back, around her kidneys. Now, particularly with that last line, remember what I said about your vital organs shutting down. There was a story I heard that a member of the IRA who was imprisoned by the British state made it to 46 days of hunger strike, and that was the day that they passed away. So I am very concerned about her well-being right now, especially as this is the second time an ambulance has been called in the past few days. After protesters, including MP Zara Sultana, had been protesting outside the prison since 2:30 a.m. this morning, an ambulance did eventually get called for Kessa. This was the moment that it arrived. Now, I can only really hope that it arrived in time. As far as I'm aware, I haven't heard anything to the contrary, but I'm really hoping that that young woman is okay. Now, the response from the right wing has been predictable, both on Twitter and on their shitty little TV shows. Now, Julia Hartley-Brewer had David Bajent, a Your Party councillor, on to discuss the hunger strikes earlier today.
Genuinely, I care not a jot whether these people live or die.
I'm sorry for you.
I care not a jot.
Well, I'm sorry that you feel like
Why?
that. Because I think that's heartless.
But they're choosing. If they choose to starve themselves to death, I'm not quite sure why that's my problem. If they choose to starve themselves to death, that is their business and not mine.
Well, I think it is my business. I'm a politician, so therefore I do think it's my business. I think Zara Sultana thinks it's her business.
So the authorities should give in to emotional blackmail.
I don't think it's emotional blackmail.
Isn't it?
It's drawing attention.
So their case should get priority over other cases of people waiting on remand a long time for their cases. Their case should go ahead because they're willing to go on a hunger strike.
No, I think they should be released on bail, probably.
They should be released
I don't know. Yeah,
maybe the British people don't want people who've been accused of violent crimes to be released on bail.
Maybe British people don't want people to be incarcerated for over a year without trial.
The British state is wasting resources to keep her in jail. She is not a public threat to anyone. She threw paint. That's an active choice that they're making. It's an active choice every bit as much as her refusing food is an active choice. I should say allegedly through paint. But yeah, that's an active choice being made by the British state just as much as her refusing food is an active choice. And it is very much your concern, Julia. If the state can lock you up without trial, it is your concern. Especially with how authoritarian this Labour government is. Like, they're not fans of yours, Julia. I wouldn't be risking this. If I were you, I would be like, nah, don't want the state to have that power. Like, surely, if Starmer had jailed someone she agreed with for a non-violent crime associated with acts of violence, can you imagine how Julia would react? Oh, wait, hang on a second. No, but sorry, we don't have to imagine. We just have to compare how she reacted to Lucy Connolly's imprisonment.
You shouldn't have been arrested, and you certainly shouldn't have gone to prison. I so wish that you had pleaded not guilty, even if you end up remanded, because with this change, we still have jury trials now, not for long, and the jury, I believe, would, if I'd set this out in the jury, we would have acquitted you.
If she wants to imprison herself by inciting violence on Twitter and helping to instigate a riot, Julia, I don't see how that's my problem. I don't see how that's my business. If Lucy Connolly wants to imprison herself, if she wants to get put in prison, but for inciting a riot, I don't see how that's my problem. That sounds like a you problem, Lucy. It sounds like a you problem, Julia. Kessa Zara has been in prison 5 times longer than Lucy Connolly. And Lucy Connolly got a fucking trial. Lucy Connolly is spoken about like she is some, like, victim of the big government, I'm trying to think of the term, big government wokeism, if you like, is probably the term that they would use. But like there was some massive injustice around Lucy Connolly. Kessa Zara has been in prison without a trial for 5 times longer than Lucy Connolly. I feel like I have to say it again because it's so interesting how the standards are just applied so differently if you're a right-wing white freak who whines about refugees in hotels. Harriet, first of all, what do you make of the way Kessa has been treated? Do you think HMP Bronzefield are failing to protect her?
I think that if we look at the testimony from Kessa and the other 7 hunger striking Palestine action prisoners, it looks like she's been treated incredibly poorly and really let down by both politicians and the prison system. But the first question I sort of want to ask here is, why is the British government allowing sites and subsidiaries of Israel's largest arms company to operate on British soil after a UN commission found that Israel had committed genocide in Gaza? Why is that being allowed to happen? It seems like the British government is more interested in protecting the assets of an Israeli arms company than it is the lives of the principled young people who allegedly took part in Palestine Action activities. Palestine Action, as I feel absolutely duty bound to always repeat as a journalist, is currently a prescribed organisation, and showing support for its activities is currently punishable by up to 14 years in prison. However, it was not a proscribed organisation when the Filton 24 action allegedly took place. And I think that it's also important to distinguish between the Filton 24 action, which Kessa Zura was part of, allegedly, and the Bryce Norton 5, who threw red paint on RAF planes at Bryce Norton, again, allegedly. And that incident was seen as like a trigger for the British government to bring forward their prescription of Palestine Action under the Terrorism Act. I think that Kessa and all 8 hunger strikers are in this position because the government has weaponised and misused counter-terror legislation, and that there is really a level of powerlessness when you only have your body left with which, to use to get anything that you feel you need. Like, they can't be taking this action lightly. They are at risk of death. It's incredibly frightening that they might not live because of this. And yeah, what we know from the Council of Palestine Action prisoners, I've been in touch with T. Hodger and her younger sister Rama about her treatment. T was hospitalised a couple of weeks ago. She had another hunger strike, which she took part in earlier in the year, because she believed she was being retrospectively punished by the prison system after the prescription of Palestine Action. She said that she was being treated much worse after the prescription. She said she was called a terrorist by prison staff. She had her mail withheld. She had her job at the prison library taken away from her under spurious reasons, and it was something that she really loved doing, and she felt like it gave her purpose in prison. I think it's also important to say that HMP Bronzefield have responded to allegations that they have really failed in their duty of care towards prisoners. They've said that they can't provide information about specific prisoners. They always say that. But they do say that all prisoners have full access to healthcare, including attendance to external medical facilities if needed. However, according to Prisoners for Palestine, the campaign group that is supporting the hunger strikers, they were trying to get an ambulance to come for Kessa Zura for 19 hours. And they kept being told by the ambulance service there was no point in sending one because it would just be turned away by the prison authorities. So we have Kessa Zura, who has not been convicted of any crime, over 45 days without food, with all the reported symptoms, which are incredibly serious, and an ambulance only finally took her away after about 19 hours of pressure, of protesting, of MPs like Zara Sultana standing outside of HMP Bronzefield. That very much looks to me like HMP Bronzefield, which is run by the private company Sodexo, let's not forget, for profit, not taking very much care at all over the life of a young person who is far braver than me and far more principled than most of us.
Yeah. I absolutely... Oh, sorry, my sound just cracked out. Is it all right for you? Can you hear me okay?
Yeah, I can hear you.
You can? Okay, cool. Sorry, my sound just sort of cracked then. I didn't know something had gone wrong. I was... yes, I mean, 100% agree, of course, Harriet. And I was thinking about how fundamental that right is, not to be convicted retrospectively for things that have become illegal since you committed the act. It was written into by the National Assembly of France in 1789. It was written into the Declaration of on the Rights of Man and Citizen. It is one of the fundamental rights one of the fundamental human rights, but primarily one of the fundamental legal rights. And it is wild to me that it is being applied, that the law seems to be being applied retroactively to these people, if not in de jure terms, in de facto terms, with the way that they're being treated, for example, by prison staff. But I do want to ask, why do you think Julia Hartley-Brewer, who we saw the clip of, is so indifferent to people being imprisoned without trial, but so outraged when people are imprisoned after being convicted for incitement? It's almost like there's no self-interest there. There's no sort of like, I could be in this situation one day. Sometimes I just think these people aren't very bright.
I think that Julia Hartley-Brewer has a deficiency when it comes to basic human empathy for others. I wonder if she would say that, oh, they're making a choice to somebody with anorexia. I wonder if she'd make that same statement. But I think, the reason for this is because Julia Hartley-Brewer is an Israeli mouthpiece. She does propaganda for the Israeli state. Just go and look for a video posted 2 months ago. It's available on the Stand With Us Instagram. It's about her visit to Israel, her recent trip, where she speaks about how Israel has so much to teach us in the West about right and wrong. I really think that people should watch it. It has like emotional music playing while she talks about the Israeli conscription of 18 and 19-year-olds and how great it is that they proudly put on their uniform to defend their country and commit war crimes, that we've all seen. You don't get much more ardent Zionist propaganda than Julia Hartley-Brewer. I mean, this is Hasbara. This is Israeli propaganda in action. It seems to just flow from her in this really, she really believes it, I think. And I don't know, I feel a bit sorry for her.
Yeah. It can't be a nice existence. I'm being told that we need to go on to the comments section, as we don't want the show to go on too long. Apologies, guys. So with that said, let's bring in our producer, Curtis, who I hope has been starring some comments for us to go over. Can you hear Curtis? Because I can't hear Curtis.
I can hear Curtis.
Oh, that might be a me problem. Okay, I apologise to Julia. This is definitely a me problem. Why can I not hear you? This is really strange.
It might not just be you, Ben. Comments say that you cannot be heard either.
Curtis, I would leave the studio and come back in then. Try that. Give that a go. We're going to try something, guys, behind the scenes and see if we can make it work, see if we can send Curtis away and bring him back again, and hopefully it'll all be sorted. We have lots of tech issues. I mean, happens to the best. I've seen Navarra have tech issues too. I know it's not just us. Hopefully we'll get those sorted.
I could neither confirm nor deny whether Navarra ever has any.
I'm sure they wouldn't if you were more involved in the tech side of things, Harriet. Definitely.
We have wonderful, hard-working producers and tech people on Navarra, and I love them very much.
Yes.
And I hope they're watching.
Can we give this a go? Are we good?
We are.
I hear you through your earphones as well. That's really... Oh. We've lost the connection. No? If you guys can still hear me...
Come back,
I can hear you. Come back for us, please. Don't leave us. We don't know what we're doing. Right. Cool. Is Harriet's name there for anyone else as well? I don't know how that's happened. On my screen, your name is in the middle of the comments box section at the bottom.
Okay, right. Are we good?
Yes, I think we're good. Let's just make sure to confirm with the comments whether they can hear you. I can hear you now, which is a step forward.
Harriet, can you hear me?
I can hear you.
This fucking software. Okay, so I'm going to plug us. You can see our little website link there, turnleftmedia.co.uk/support. Please consider donating, because we want to get a studio, and once we can get a studio, we can upgrade to a proper rig, and we have a built-in software. At the moment, we're using a browser-based software, and it's buggy as fuck. It's the best we could possibly get until we're all in the same building. So that's my plug. Right, let's actually go to the comments, which we promised to you guys. I'm going to go and quickly show you this. Andrew Carter 1771 kindly gifted 5 Turn Left memberships. So thank you for that. And oh, I don't know why, but we've got Harriet's name written twice, so I'm going to quickly get rid of that. How many times are you there? Your tag is there 3. Okay.
Incredible.
This has been such a stupendous show so far, hasn't it? I've said that word twice now. Okay, there we go. Sorry, I'm so sorry, guys, for this. This is it's been a while since I've been producing. So, in terms of the first story, Ken Loach has been so unfairly maligned, it's heartbreaking. So yeah, as you referred to, people engaging in historical revisionism, Ken Loach wasn't expelled for anti-Semitism. He was expelled for giving support to Labour against a witch hunt, which, by today's standards, have only emboldened their viewpoint. I mean, we all knew at the time anyway, but emboldened their viewpoint that there was a witch hunt against the left in the Labour Party. And Jamie Driscoll just shared a platform with Ken Loach, who, by the way, I think lives in the North East. It was probably one of his constituencies. So that's simply speaking to a resident of the North. And he was booted out of the party. So yeah, we all absolutely agree with that. He was unfairly maligned. So Jamie tried doing the Keith Starmer impression, and Edward Sexby says, we need a compilation of lefties doing Keith impressions. Could I trouble either of you to do your best Keir Starmer impression?
I couldn't do a Keir Starmer impression. I'd have to like think about it and work on it for a while, in order to be able to do a Keir Starmer impression. Impressions are something that, yeah, they're not my forte. I don't know about Harriet. What do you think?
No, absolutely fuck that. I can't subject anyone to it. He's very robotic. Yeah, there's such a grey nasal quality to his speech.
I mean, no different to Rachel Reeves. They're all sort of a carbon copy. All right, sorry, Edward. None of us are willing to subject ourselves to doing a Keir Starmer impression. Maybe after a few beers, but maybe, I don't know. Leonard Dominiques, I hope I said that right, says, your party ain't going to win any seats bar JC and Zara Sultana, lad. So, Leonard, sorry, I don't know why I butchered your name. Leonard says that basically your party isn't going to be electorally viable apart from Jeremy Corbyn and Zara Sultana. I think Jeremy Corbyn would 100% win his seat if he wants to fight again. Do you agree? Do you think that basically your party is capped at 2 seats with their most prolific campaigners, or do you think they would get more than that?
I mean, I don't think it's necessarily capped. It depends how things go from here. It depends how collective leadership works out for them, how quickly they can get their act together, and the party can actually get going and recover from the frankly disastrous beginnings, which I don't think anybody, even people who really, really want that project to work, can kind of defend in terms of how it's looked from the outside, which has been a shit show from beginning to end, with its fudged power sharing deal, all the briefing against each other, the constant statements on social media, threats of legal action. If they can get over that and actually field some decent candidates, they might be able to. And I think that what they should do is, if they want to be viable, they should not run candidates against the Greens as well.
Of course, I agree with that completely. But I'd also add that if they do have any chance of success, and I hope that they do, because there are, I mean, even Jamie Driscoll agrees there are plenty of good people inside of your party. Like he did state that. I've seen him state that somewhere. I can't remember exactly where he said there's plenty of good people inside your party. And I think that whether they come to the forefront, and by the way, a lot of the people who went to your party conference had an overall positive impression. From what I heard, a lot of people came back and said, actually, it's gone better than the sort of headlines would give you an impression of. However, the problem is that people like Jamie Driscoll are exactly the sort of people that would give them success in communities, because the power of your party will be in its support in certain local constituencies, and the ability to sort of galvanise local communities around candidates that are like big time local focused, kind of like me and Harriet were talking about earlier. And that's a sort of like shortened version of what I'd say in response to that. But thank you, Leo. Always good to see you.
Yeah, I agree. I also think Jamie Driscoll leaving your party is a huge blow to them, because I would consider Jamie Driscoll a firebrand, actually. And the biggest problems with your party isn't the ideas. In fact, some could say there's too much ideas, because there's healthy political debates within your party. And you're right, because obviously I was there at the conference. Of the media side was like, oh, it's all drama, but actually there was robust ideas and policy ideas, right? So they're not, they have a wealth of political views. What we will probably say is, when it comes to organisation and strategy, that's the big problem. And Jamie Driscoll is someone who's very good at that. So that is a big blow. Conor McGovern says Harriet is awesome. Obviously, that is 100% correct. We agree. Harriet is awesome. Harriet, you're awesome.
Oh, Connor, no, sorry. Thank you so much. I feel like I'm not worthy of this comment. I always say to Curtis, I'm so sorry, I'm going to be rubbish today. But yeah, we do our best. I'm no Ash Sarker, put it that way.
For context, behind the scenes, we spent like 10 minutes trying to get my teleprompter to work. Like, Harriet, you're doing fine. Don't worry, you are doing great. Amazing.
I'm like, oh, Harriet's graciously waiting for us, and we can't get the fucking teleprompter to work. And you're saying, I'm not worthy of this comment. Our tech isn't worthy of you, frankly. We should be doing better. So, viewers, give us money. Sorry, that was a plug. Becca, any chance? Becca says, and I'm glad someone's brought it up. Harriet's got sparkling tinsel. Forget the book wallpaper. That's the look. May happy sparkle season, Harriet. How fantastic does she look? I mean, it was actually a last-minute thing. We're like, let's get some Christmassy stuff in. It looks great.
I thought it might be overkill, but you know what? You can never be too sparkly. You can never have too much leopard print, too much black, or too many sparkles.
Good, great save there. I'm just covered in black.
You could probably have too much black, because I'm pretty sure the last couple of times you've hosted, Ben, it's just the same black jumper.
Yes. Do you know, the funny thing is, I'm looking after a friend's puppy at the moment, and he's all black. And I've taken several pictures where I've just had him against and I own a lot of black clothes. Apparently, you just can't see him because he's all black as well. It's just like a shadow. But yeah, sorry, there's a bit of a personal anecdote. Go on, let's go on with the comments.
Jamie Alice says, and this is in reference to the second story with Rory Stewart. I hate this smug Tory twat. I don't think we really need to respond to that. We can just say, you're right, he is a smug Tory twat. What I do hate, though, is the Liberals trying to make him out as someone who's liberal or he's not as bad. Just because politicians have got worse a day doesn't mean that we can look at Rory Sugar. Oh, actually, it's not that bad. He still supported austerity. And I might add as well, I mean, on the discussion of economics, right? The entire austerity project, where 330,000 people were murdered by the state, was based on a fucking spreadsheet error. Now, there was this, for some reason, widespread view among government officials and economists was that once you hit 90% debt to GDP ratio, that is, if our debt is 90% of the total output of the country's value, that the economy would start to slow down and growth would go down. for some reason. I mean, why would that suddenly happen if we hit a certain threshold of debt? It makes no sense. And that's true. It doesn't actually make any sense. But for some reason, someone made a spreadsheet error in which this spreadsheet, I don't know what particular spreadsheet it was, calculated this idea that, yes, once government spending hits a certain number, the economy slows. That's not true, but everyone took that as gospel. So that is why entire governments were like, we need to limit spending, because if we hit 90% of debt to GDP ratio, then the economy slows. So they were so obsessed by not getting to 90%, they decided that they would institute austerity. Now, look, I'm against austerity, but if you're going to bring in austerity, why do it on the poor? So it was still a political choice anyway. But the point I'm making is Rory Stewart based his entire economic output on a spreadsheet error, and hundreds of thousands of people were killed. So I think that's very noteworthy when he's trying to weigh in on economics. On the almond tree, yeah, he literally just misspoke. I mean, I think that was what was so disgusting about Rory Stewart's clip afterwards, retrospectively looking at that and going, he didn't know the difference between the debt and the deficit. I mean, he just literally slipped up. That was it.
Yeah, it's just so uncharitable. Like, that approach just seems so shitty to me. And yeah, I just want to repeat again, Rory Stewart's politics, don't get caught up in it. You know, don't get, it's just the fact that he's anti-Farage, don't get caught up in that, because again, Rory Stewart's politics ends in Nigel Farage. Like, that is the end point of Rory Stewart's politics. It's where it goes.
Rory Stewart is like a great example of somebody who really highlights the bullshit of this compassionate conservatism. Like, just because he can go up against JD Vance on Twitter and say, oh, you know, your reading of the Bible and of Christianity is off, which is true, it doesn't make Rory Stewart any better of a person or any better of a politician just because he's less extreme than the most extreme of the insane Christian right in the US. Like, if you put anyone next to JD Vance, they look more reasonable.
I'm going to go through these comments quite quickly because we started 15 minutes late and it is 9 o'clock. So I do apologise if I do go through these quickly. Quickly, though, Vicky Clee says that Ben's looking very 90s boy band tonight, which I think is actually a look. That's a compliment, probably. Leonard comes back and says, Rory Stewart doesn't think Gary Stevenson is an academic despite having a master's in economics. He actually has 2 PhDs. He's a classist twat who is trying desperately to stay relevant after destroying the UK. Rory Stewart did eventually apologise, but his assumption that, and I quote, Gary Stevenson is a pseudo-economist. So not just to say that he doesn't really know what he's talking about, but actually he's pushing bullshit economic myths. But Gary Stevenson is extremely qualified. I think Rory Stewart has a philosophy degree. I'm not downplaying those who have a philosophy degree, but you can't be calling actual qualified economists as pseudo-intellectual. It's clearly classist. He's basically, for Gary Stevenson, working class accent, came from a working class background. He can't possibly know what he's talking about. Noffel, friend of the show, says, and this is in terms of the discussions around Mariana Mazzucato, also important to note that it's not just the state, but the value comes from workers. They just had access to the capital to innovate. Workers created it, the private sector packaged it. And this is the thing, I mean, the private sector is not important, but Mazzucato, who, yeah, you're right, isn't a fully subscribed MMT, modern monetary theorist, but basically her premise is that, and it's just true, that the state is a very good way of boosting the private sector. This is why she calls it the entrepreneurial state. And for some reason, what's that word? Heterodoxical? Is that the right word? Well, those that think of the mainstream macroeconomist, right, seem to think that the state and the private sector are so separate, and the state is there only to stop wealth being created. Of course, yes, it can constrain wealth when it comes to regulations such as, I don't know, child labourers. Of course, bosses like child labourers because they're cheap. Yes, there's certain regulations which are important that can constrain wealth, but it's also a very good way of creating wealth through public investment. So instead of fucking privatizing privatizing everything and using private contractors to build shit. The state can build stuff, infrastructure, that has a multiplier effect. It creates jobs, tax receipts, economic activity. That's the basic premise of Mazzucato, and yet she is treated as like far left field, when actually she's simply explaining social democracy in the most simplistic way. And of course, when it comes to modern monetary theory, you don't... The idea with MMT, I'll be very quick. The idea with MMT, it does ignore the bond markets because it relies on the Bank of England to create money, and then that money is spent into the economy, and the markets are not the constraint of borrowing or spending money. It's resources, inflation. But currency is important because we're not the United States, neither are we a closed circuit economy. We do still rely on trade, so currency is still important, but the way in which you can basically spend a shitload of money without spooking the markets isn't by being fiscally prudent. It's doing the John McDonnell thing, which is basically in 2017 and 2019, he communicated to the City of London and the market, said, this is what we're going to do. We are going to engage in quantitative easing, and we are going to spend a lot more money, and we're going to raise taxes. But this is our long-term thinking. One, we're going to pay for it by raising taxes, and two, the money we spend is going to create growth, it's going to create jobs. It's a long-term project. Communication is key, not the policy. Now, Liz Truss crashed the markets, not necessarily because the policies of cutting taxes for her base, which is what she did, though. The reason why the markets were spooked is because she did it like on a Saturday randomly, and the markets were spooked because they were like, oh, there's unfunded tax cuts. You haven't told us, one, how you're going to pay for it, or two, if you're not going to pay for these tax cuts, is there a long-term economic strategy here? Now, I don't agree with this economic thinking, but people on the right will say, cut taxes and that will create growth. Again, I don't think that happens. But had she had a long-term project, even was elected on a manifesto that said that, the markets wouldn't have been spooked. And this is what Rory Stewart and many macroeconomists, mainstream macroeconomists, don't understand. It's not necessarily the policies. The way to keep bond markets calm is to basically explain your long-term strategy, because what investors want is stability. They actually don't particularly mind if you're going to raise taxes on the wealthy. They just need to know, are they going to have a safe return on investment? And bond markets are a very safe return on investment because it's the British state is always going to be there. Sorry.
No, it's good.
Okay.
It's good.
HQ2 Productions. Harriet is my favourite from the Navarra team. Haven't seen her anywhere since her last time on here. It's good to see you again.
Oh, that's so nice. Yeah, I've been struck down with the super flu for like 2 weeks, and then all the rest of the time Navarra like keeps me chained up in a basement, so they don't let me out there.
Fair.
Oh no, justice for Harriet and Navarra.
Yeah, I mean, whatever you need to do to earn money, that's fine. Yeah, sure. Go on then.
Well, we would always have you. We love having you on.
Yeah, I'll hopefully be back again in the new year.
100%. Becca, Harriet, we need you in one of Zach's ears and Helena in the other. I think this is your response to like Zach being a bit more astute when it comes to bullshit framing. Like, I think Zach does acknowledge himself that even though he wasn't prepped that this is going to be like questions about the economy, you got to be ready, especially when a bad faith actor like Rory Stewart is doing that. Because I find it strange. You get it like, Ben, when you're on GB News and when I'm on GB News, Nana Akua will throw bullshit questions at you and you've literally got 5 minutes to do the segment. But it's funny, they have a podcast. The entire point of a podcast is to have more longer thought out conversations and arguments, yet Rory Stewart is applying the mainstream media way of interrogating people in a podcast format, and people don't like that. They want thought out answers, not what's the deficit, blah, blah, blah.
Yeah, I don't think that Zach was unprepared. I think that he was told that it would be one way and it was very clearly weaponized another way with gotcha questioning. I don't think that any blame in this situation lies with Zach at all. I think that this is just part of like a mainstream media playbook, and they wanted to trip him up and make him look silly, which is why they used that specific part of the clip as their intro. Like, they thought they got what they wanted out of it, but actually they both just look really like disingenuous. And Zach's now come out and said, you know, I was actually told that this was going to be an emotional interview that just centered around like my personal experiences of bullying, being gay, anti-Semitism, and then suddenly they started hammering me on the economy.
Yeah.
I think what Zach said as well was that, you know, I should memorize certain of these key figures and stuff. And to some degree, yes. You know, if you listen to this, Zach, you might, because I know you sometimes listen to us. I would say that yes, you can do things like, for example, like memory techniques, including things that Darren Brown's done on mind palace memory techniques and things. Really, really powerful. Really, really good to do. Like the ancient Greeks and Romans used to use memory visualization. It's really, really powerful. It's also really, really good for storytelling. All of this is really good, but at the end of the day, the problem can't be solved. The problem of people asking those sort of like gotcha questions can't ultimately be solved by trying to memorize everything. You have to be a bit more sneaky than that, and I think you have to have those gotcha questions that you can ask in return, and you've got to have ways of circumventing questions when they're uncomfortable for you, and that might be a good approach, you know, a different approach to just having the answers. You need to have answers that aren't necessarily the answers they're looking for, but will sort of help you in that situation. At least that would be my advice. What do I know? I have very limited media experience by comparison, but yeah.
I mean, Ben bringing up Darren Brown, is that like a hypnotist dig?
Yeah, I shouldn't have brought up hypnotist. Shit.
Let's blow through these. Jim Speak says ghoulish heartless sewer. Julia heartless sewer is an accurate description. Vicky Clee says people accused of sexual assault wait at home on remand bail. So people accused of very serious crimes, not putting paint on planes, are allowed bail. Becca quite accurately and simply just says GB News and Talk TV are so racist, divisive and hateful. That's their model, isn't it? That's how they simply work. Yori Gibson, I think this was on the second story actually, on point. Harriet, again, as always. Jim Speak, again, leaves the phone number of HMP Bronzefield primary phone again. So if you wanted to leave a message or give him a phone call and whatever it is, that's your prerogative. And finally, Vicky Clee says, I think, Harriet, you were saying Julia believes in some of the stuff she believes. I think she does. But Vicky Clee says she's rage baiting for her audience. So she knows that actually she's being hypocritical when it comes to Lucy Connolly, but she's doing it on purpose. I don't know what your thoughts of that are.
I mean, yeah, a lot of these programs are... The way they work is to get the most extreme responses from the people who are watching them. So like rage baiting is a huge part of it. You want to say the most extreme things and get the most extreme reactions, because that's what boosts you within YouTube. That's what gives you loads of views. Like she might know deep down that it is really hypocritical, but it doesn't look like she cares. And if she's going to like denigrate prisoners who are in jail without trial for attacking allegedly an arms factory that is creating arms that then go to kill, maim, blow up small children in Gaza, that very much fits Julia Hartley-Brewer's agenda as somebody who believes in the Israeli project and has, you know, spewed real Zionist propaganda on multiple occasions. Like that's very much part of her brand. So whether it's, I don't know, whether it's rage baiting, whether it's hypocrisy, it kind of doesn't matter to her because it fits with who she is, it fits with the model of her show of Talk TV, and it fits with her ideological stance as somebody who believes the state of Israel can do no wrong.
I think the comment could have been in response to me as well, because the question I asked Harriet was, why do you think Julie Hartley-Brewer is so indifferent to people being imprisoned without trial, but so outraged when people are imprisoned after being convicted for incitement, right? And she's not. She's rage baiting for her audience. Also makes sense as an answer to that question as well. I think that when it comes to Julie Hartley-Brewer, absolutely, she's just rage baiting, but also there has to be, like, at some point, some self-interest has to kick in, and you'd have thought that it would have, especially around questions concerning justice, because, I mean, Julie Hartley-Brewer is somebody who could easily see herself on the wrong side of the law for the way that, for the things she says and does, and yeah, it seems wild to me that she's not sort of considering it from that perspective, but maybe I'm missing something.
She sees herself as a bit of a free speech warrior, I think, but she's obviously the rights to free assembly and free expression and free speech. They're all things that have come under threat due to the proscription of Palestine Action. Haven't obviously noticed Julia Hartley-Brewer speaking up about any of that.
Yeah.
Last comment, Ride Feather. Apparently, Ash said she was locked in a Navara cupboard between streams, so there seems to be a pattern here. Harriet, blink twice. God. Blink twice if you need help.
No, I'm fine, honestly. I'm fine. Yeah. I didn't know that was a pattern. I don't want to be bringing my employer into disrepute here.
All right, okay. Well, I am going to end the comment section there and hand it back over to Ben.
Excellent. Thank you so much, Curtis. Thank you, Harriet, for joining me tonight. It's been a real pleasure having you on, as always.
Thank you so much for having me on Turn Left again. Merry Christmas to all our audience, and I really hope to be back with you in 2026.
That's a really good point, actually. Of course, if you'll come back, we will always have you back. It's been so good to have you. Your analysis is so good. I said it last time when I was doing the producing. Your answers are always, like, absolutely spot on. It's just fantastic to have you on. I think it's just true. But yes, let's wrap up the show there. Thank you very much for tuning in. Remember that you can always go to turnleftmedia.co.uk/support if you would like to help us. Maybe we'll be able to sort out some merch in 2026. Who knows? Or you can just share the video. You can just become a subscriber. Whatever it is that you can do. Share one of our videos, one of the video clips that's put out, or whatever it is that you can do. Like, share, subscribe, all the usual stuff. And we have a show coming up on Friday, because remember that we are on every Monday, Wednesday and Friday. This has been our Normal Ireland show for Turn Left Media. Thank you very much for joining us.